first step to making our port wine cranberry poached pears is our poaching liquid. And there's a few specifics here that are very important. So we want all of our spices that we're going to use, and you can use as little as just cinnamon or as much as all of these. We're going to be using also a vanilla bean, which I'll show you how to cut that open in just a minute. In addition to the cinnamon sticks here, I have some cloves. I also like to add some star anise for some really unique flavor, and some cardamom pods. Again, these are optional, but I really enjoy those flavors in this kind of spice mix, so we're gonna add that in there. In addition to the vanilla bean, we're gonna add some sugar and cranberry juice and port wine. Now, I specifically like the Ocean Spray cranberry cocktail because of simply the color that it imparts in my final product. I've tried some of the other juices and they just don't have that vibrant color like this one imparts. Port wine is going to be a really beautiful flavor combination with this. If you don't want the alcohol in there, you can just simply leave it out. So we're gonna make a mixture of all of these, place them in a sauce pot, and go ahead and prepare our pears. Okay, so I'm gonna start with my 4 cups of cranberry juice. Add that into my sauce pot. You wanna do this all cold, and you're gonna add your pears cold as well and bring it slowly up. I have my sugar that I'm gonna add in there as well, and my port wine. It's about a cup of port wine. And then add your spices. So I have my star anise, my cinnamon sticks, my cloves, and my cardamom. The next thing I wanna prepare is my vanilla bean. So to prepare my vanilla bean here, first of all, you want to make sure it's nice and pliable so that it is, you know that it's fresh. And then we're going to take a paring knife. And what I want to do is, the vanilla bean grows off of the orchid pod just like this. You can see the little stem end here. I want to keep that intact and carve it all the way down. So I'm going to insert my knife and push all the way to basically open it up directly in half. So now it's attached at the one end, but it's open this way. And on the inside, you have all the little tiny seeds. I'm gonna use the back of my knife and my thumb to then insert my knife into the open area. And with the back of my thumb, put some pressure on it and then gather all of the little seeds onto the edge of my knife. This makes it so that I don't have any product on my paper or on my board, and then I can simply just scrape it off into my mixture and let it go. If there's anything on my thumb, get that off because this is precious gold here. You can also take that, we only need half for this recipe, so I'm going to take the half that I scraped and place that into the liquid as well so that I can infuse all the flavor from that. Now this can be used for something else. You can wrap this. What I would do, if I wasn't using this right away for something else, I would have cut it in half this direction and then opened it up only halfway here and then being able to wrap this so the whole thing is not exposed. I'm gonna be using it for something else, so I'm not worried about that. But when you do it, cut it in half this way and then scrape just these 2 sides. So realizing that my pot was a little too large and I want my pears to be fully submerged in the liquid, I changed pots to a smaller pot with less surface area. So figure out which pot is gonna work for you depending on how much liquid and how many pears that you have. I'm gonna have 5 pears here. So to prepare my pears now, what I wanna do is actually core the inside out. So I have a melon baller, which works perfect. Now you can poach these pears whole, but this is gonna be a way that we can stuff them on the inside and it doesn't really look like anything's in there until you cut it open. So what you wanna do is you wanna go to the bottom and place your melon baller right at the bottom and give it a good twist and take the inside part out and then keep carving on the inside until you get a beautiful hole right in there. And that can be stuffed with whatever filling you want to use. So the next thing after you hollow it out with the melon baller, you want to go ahead and peel it. Now remember, we're using Bosc pears for this application, and they also need to be underripe, so they're nice and crispy. And you can hear that when I peel it, that they're not soft. So that's the texture I'm looking for, so that it holds up nicely when I poach them, and it will absorb the liquid really well and hold their shape. And that's another reason why we choose this variety, because it tends to be a little bit more shapely. I really like the shape of them and the firm texture of it. It allows us to poach them and to have a beautiful texture once they're cooked. So I'm gonna take this pear and place it into my liquid and go ahead and poach them this way. So we're gonna take them over to the stove. Make sure that before you put any of the pears in there that you do stir that mixture to dissolve the sugar that we put in it earlier, to make sure that it's not just sitting on the bottom. So now my pears are ready for poaching, and the proper procedure for poaching is starting in a cold liquid and slowly bringing it up to temperature where it is only at just barely a simmer. If you get it too hot, the outside of the fruit is going to cook until it creates a mushy texture, and the inside will not be cooked properly. And if you bring it too low, nothing is really going to happen. So we want to make sure that it comes up to temperature, it starts steaming and just barely bubbling around the edge. And we're going to cook that until it's done. That could vary depending on the ripeness of your fruit. So we're going to keep our eye on it, and I have my mise en place ready. I have a skewer to test it with, a slotted spoon so I can pull it out to test it. And then when we're ready to drain, I have like a colander over something else that it can drain into, and we're going to chill the pears separately, the liquid separately, and then store it together overnight to really infuse the color into it. So we're going to turn this on and let it come just to that simmer. We'll come check it, and we'll turn it down if we need to in just a little bit. Okay, so our liquid has come up, it's starting to simmer around the edge, and this is the point where I'd like to turn it down so it does not come to a boil. So I know it's getting hot, I can see the steam coming off. And you do not need to cover this, but you could, if you wanted to, weigh these down with a plate if you wanted to, or even parchment that you could cut into a circle and just kind of put it down in there. And that'll help protect the fruit from popping up a little, at least keep the liquid down on the inside. So we're gonna cook this. I'm gonna check it, every maybe 15 minutes just to see where it's at. And the way that you wanna test it later on is to take it here and then to poke the sides. And it should actually go right through. It should not have any resistance. And then it's fully poached, and we'll remove those. So we'll just keep checking that, making sure it never gets above this, but we do want to see the steam coming off of it, a nice gentle poach throughout the entire cooking process. So if you are interested in covering this, you can take the parchment paper and kind of basically fold it in half again, in half this way to create a point, in half again this way. And then you always want to cut the center out to create a hole in the center for the steam to come through, and then measure from the center of the pot out here, and then cut kind of at a rounded angle. And then what happens is that you'll get a circle that's actually a little large. So we'll cut that a little bit more. You get that circle that will come out. And then you can place this right inside of there, get it wet, and that will help keep all of that fruit, not necessarily pushing it down, the weight of it, but it'll trap that steam and help keep it inside to cook it more evenly. So it's time to check the pears, so I'm going to remove the paper. And then I'm going to check the pears by very gently putting them on my slotted spoon, taking the skewer and poking through, and it should have like very little resistance. It feels great going through, it's not mushy and it's not hard. So at this point I'm going to take the pear and place it up onto my straining surface. Again, trying to get a hold of the stem. I personally like to leave the stems on, so something to grab onto. and then drain it off. I'm gonna cool these completely in the refrigerator. Then I'm gonna cool my liquid completely. And then I'm gonna place them back into the liquid so they can sit overnight. So notice the color now, and then notice the color when we come back tomorrow after it's been sitting in overnight. Now I'm ready to make my whipped chocolate ganache. We're going to be using our milk chocolate for this recipe, and I want to start by melting my chocolate. I'm going to place this in a microwavable container. Melt this at 30 seconds at a time, stirring it every time until it is totally melted. We don't want it hot, but we do want it melted. And then I have 2 sets of cream here. One cream, which is in a small sauce pot, and then we're going to add our invert sugar, our glucose to this. So you guys have glucose. We're going to be using that in the right amount into this recipe. We're going to place this right in here, bring this just to a boil over the stovetop, and then pour it into our melted chocolate. And then I have another set of cream, but that's going to remain cold, and we'll emulsify that at the end of the ganache making process. This is the chocolate. It's almost all the way melted. It's okay to have a few little pieces in there because, again, I don't want to overheat it. So microwave 30 seconds at a time. The last one I did was 15 seconds. I want to make sure that that's ready to accept my cream. And then we're going to go look at the cream that is just coming to a boil. So this is the cream with the invert sugar glucose mixture. And then we want it just to start kind of simmering. So we do not want this to overflow, and we want it to be hot enough to be able to, again, melt the residual of any chocolate that's unmelted. This is as far as you want to go, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, and we're going to bring it back and add it to our chocolate. So the first way we're going to add this is by hand, and we're going to add a couple additions at a time before we use the immersion blender. And we're just going to take a rubber spatula and stir this in. You might see it start to get thick and it looks like it's broken, but it's not. So we just want to, sometimes that happens with the milk and with the white chocolate. You'll see it looks kind of grainy texture and very thick. Don't worry about that. We're adding this hot cream a little bit at a time. Don't pour it all in at once in the beginning. We want to create that emulsification, and I promise you it will happen. So kind of scrape the sides and keep mixing it by hand. It will go through a stage where it almost like seizes, and then it will come out of that stage. See that? It looks broken. That's completely normal. A little bit at a time. Do this in quite a few additions. Remember, this is the hot cream mixture. Keep adding that. Do not use a whisk. We're just using a spatula. We don't want to incorporate air into this. It's slowly starting to want to come back, but it looks like that it's sliding right off, like the fat is separating. That's okay. Keep at it. So we really want to create that strong emulsification, and that will happen with just a matter of time. This will keep that bond nice and strong. It'll be very shiny. It's already happening. You can see the difference already in that ganache. A little bit more. So don't rush this process. You do want to do this in a container that is somewhat deep. You see that, how creamy and smooth that looks? Because we're gonna add, I'm gonna add the rest of it now. We're going to add the immersion blender to it, and if it's too shallow, then it will splatter everywhere. And so that's why I have it in this container. It's a little deeper. You can use one of the quart containers, like the clear plastic quart containers will work fine. Now, this would be a fantastic ganache for a filling if you were just to leave it like this. But because we're going to make a whipped ganache, we need a higher ratio of fat to it in order to make it lighter and airier. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add the immersion blender into this just to make sure it's emulsified well. Then we will add the cold cream. So place this right on the inside. Place it on the center. Give it about 20 seconds or so. Let it really come together. And then we're gonna add our cold cream. So I'm gonna take the cold cream here and go ahead and add that in while I'm emulsifying with the immersion blender until it looks smooth. So now this looks like chocolate milk almost. Don't worry about that because we are making the whipped ganache. So basically it's a chocolate cream mixture that then tomorrow I will whip. This needs to sit about 12 hours to really crystallize properly back into the chocolate, back into its original formation so that it will have this incredibly creamy, beautiful texture that holds together very well, that it won't break on us. So what I'm gonna do is transfer this to a more shallow bowl, and then we're gonna cover that and place that in the refrigerator. So once this is fully emulsified, I'm gonna pour this into a more shallow bowl. So it has more surface area to then cool down and set for us. Scrape everything you can out of there. And then what I want to do is place a piece of plastic wrap directly over the surface. Pretend it's like a custard and we don't want a skin on it. So I'm going to go inside and make sure it's touching the cream. And then this is going to set overnight. And you'll see that the chocolate will solidify once it gets cold. It'll be a little bit thicker. And then we're just going to lightly whip that tomorrow, either by hand or with your electric mixer. Our pears have rested and been marinating overnight in the refrigerator in our poaching liquid. So we want to remove them now to let them drain. And I'm just going to grab the stem. You can see the amazing color. And I want to kind of dab them on a paper towel just to let them drain off a little bit. And then I'm going to place them on my sheet pan. I'm going to remove them all. And then I'm going to strain the liquid and reduce that down and make a syrup. Now you can freeze this into sorbet, or you can create the syrup that we're going to do for a garnish. So pretty much like a simple syrup. It's just going to reduce down, get that syrupy consistency. But these are amazing, and they're actually stained throughout the pear. So the whole thing has absorbed the color and the flavor, not just the outside edge. And you'll see that later when we cut it open. So we're going to strain this now and then reduce down the liquid to create a sauce. So I've set up another pot with a strainer. You can do this over a bowl and then place it back in the pot. I am looking for a decent amount of surface area to cook this and reduce it down so it'll go a little faster. I want to save the vanilla bean. So this guy right here can be reused, put into your sugar and create a vanilla sugar. So I want to rinse it off though because it's got a lot of sugar content on there and the juice. Rinse it off, pat it dry, let it kind of air dry, and then stick it into a container of sugar, and then you have your first batch of vanilla sugar going. The rest of this can be tossed, or you can reuse it for something else, but we're gonna go ahead and save that later, and then take this to the stove and start reducing it down. Bring it to a boil, and reduce it until it really comes down, and you'll see it start to foam almost, and that's a really good sign that it's starting to thicken enough so that it's going to create the syrup that we're looking for. This is my dried vanilla bean. I'm going to place into a container of sugar and then cover it with a little bit more sugar and put the lid on and just let it set. This is good for months. You can keep adding vanilla beans to it, keep adding sugar to it. It's just a great addition to your pantry, and you can use this sugar for any application. Here's my sauce reduction. So this is the poaching liquid that I'm reducing down, and you can see it's starting to get a little bit of the bubbles that are a little larger and a little bit foamy. You'll see a major difference in just a few minutes, but we're definitely reducing down. This is probably reduced about to a quarter of its original size at the moment. So this process is concentrating the sugars, evaporating the moisture, and kind of activating the residual pectin that's left in the juice from the cranberries. And that'll give it kind of like a gelatinous, thick texture when we're finished. So you can see when I move the pan, it starts to kind of foam up. We're getting really close, just another minute or two of the reduction. So when the entire surface area is enveloped by the foam, you know that you're very close. You can see the bubbles popping, and I don't see any of the clear liquid underneath. It's just creating that foam. You're getting very thick. You can always stop it and test it. Place a little bit in the refrigerator and see how it sets when it's cold. You do not want to overcook this because you will burn the sugars and it will get like a hard candy and it will taste very bitter because you've burnt it at that point. So be very cautious, don't overdo it, and we'll show you the final result. This is a small batch that I set in the refrigerator, and it is very gelatinous. It's kind of like a syrupy jello. If it gets this thick, you can fix it by just adding a touch of water and whisking that in until it's smooth again. So you can get the right consistency that you're looking for. I want to be able to pipe this on the plate without it losing its shape too much. So don't add too much water, just a couple drops to get it to the consistency you're looking for. All right, so then I'm gonna place this into my small sauce bottle. I have a little tiny one. You can use a larger one if you want. And then this will be ready for our plate up. The next step to our dessert is working with our whipped ganache. So before I whip that, I'm gonna prepare my pastry bag by cutting the top opening and placing a pastry tip on the inside. Just enough so that the hole will come through. Okay, so this is ready to go. I'm actually going to twist my bag, push the bag into the tip, and then roll the front down. Now I'm ready to fill my bag when my ganache is ready. This is the ganache that we let sit for overnight, so about 12 hours. I'm gonna remove the plastic wrap, and you can see that it's kind of solid. It's got a nice thickness to it. It's very gooey, and this has had allowed time for the structure of the chocolate to reset. So that crystalline structure has really allowed for it to set again. Now it's still very loose, and it's not really the texture I'm looking for piping. So what I'm gonna do is just whisk this by hand. You could do this in a mixer, but it won't take very much effort to whisk this by hand. And what I'm looking for is more of a medium kind of stiff peak. We don't want it to be too loose and we don't want it to be too stiff because we want it to keep its shape really nicely. So your choice, in a mixer or by hand. Bring the ganache just to that medium stiff peak. It should start to look like a really creamy icing towards the end. We don't want to go too far because it will get a little grainy, and we want that luxurious texture. So when you get to the point where you're ready to use it, you want to place it into your bag very carefully and just use whatever it is you need. You can always reserve the rest for later. Go ahead and pull your bag all the way up and either use the side of your hands, or you can grab your plastic bowl scraper and use this straight edge to push all the air out and all of your ganache towards the tip. When you're ready to pipe, you want to twist the bag, release the tip, and put the pressure from the palm of your hand. When you're ready to pipe, you want to release that tip, twist the bag and put the pressure from the palm of your hand. The first step in plating our dessert is to fill the inside of our poached pear. So I'm going to place the tip and push with the palm of my hand until all of that ganache fills the center. We'll do that for all of these, and then we'll add some more ganache to the plate. These can be stored just like this for quite a few days in the refrigerator, filled, ready to go. So plating a dessert, there are many elements that you need to consider. Obviously, when we're creating the components, we want to consider texture, color, flavor, seasonality, all of those good things, size, shape, all of that. Choose a plate that works for you. I'm going to do 2 different plate ups here, one in a bowl and one on a plate. And then have all your components right next to you. So we have our stuffed poached pear, we have our cocoa streusel, I have my pear chips, I have some nasturtiums that I had growing in the yard, I have my sauce and extra ganache. So we're gonna use all of these elements to plate the dessert. And again, there are no rules. What I'm looking for is some height, some texture, and just a really nice composition. So I'm gonna offset the pear and then do all of the other garnishes kind of on the side. Starting with a little bit of ganache right here, just to kind of glue down my pear so it doesn't move on the plate. There's nothing worse than somebody delivering a dessert and it slides here, artfully placed. And that will be part of the dessert as well as a vehicle to hold my streusel. Again, for texture, for all sorts of different elements here. Okay, and then we also have some pear chips that we can utilize on there. And I can place them inside of here like this, or I can place them in my pear itself. And to do that, you will want to grab a little knife and put a little slit so that when you place the pear, it will hold itself in there. So we can offset, so we don't have a pear in every single one. We can go ahead and place a flower in some of the other ones. And then we have our sauce. And the sauce, you can do dots around or you can stripe it. Again, there's no rules, but this gives us another color and texture. And I just want you to have fun with the dessert. And the idea is that everything gets eaten together, so it should all make sense together. So we have our first composed dessert with our pear chips, our poached pear, our whipped ganache, our cocoa streusel, and our sauce reduction. Here's another option for plating. You can place it right into a bowl as well. I have less surface area to display my ingredients, but it gives it an incredible depth and just kind of interesting perspective. What you can also do is cut the pear in half so you can display the interior. So I want to leave the stem intact and go ahead and open it up, lean it against the bowl, and then you can also place a section of it over here. Again, using kind of your ganache to prop it up, and then possibly using a little bit of that streusel to give it that height as well. So many, many ways to display this dessert. I'm gonna go ahead and finish garnishing by putting a few more dollops of ganache, some more streusel, A little bit of flowers. And we can go ahead and place the pear chips kind of opposite here, so it has different senses of direction. And then go ahead and add your sauce. This sauce, I'm gonna kind of like drip it down so it gives a nice shine on there. See that? And then go ahead and place it in between my ganache on my plate. Less room for that kind of design, but you get the idea. And again, it makes the pear look a little bit more moist on there. So 2 different ways of plating, one open, one closed. Your choice. Have fun.